Story 1. I never believed in that sixth sense bullshit until last winter. I'm Julia, 32, living in a small town in Vermont where everyone claims to know each other, but nobody really does. My place is this old Victorian at the edge of town. Beautiful, but full of drafts and creaks that keep you up at night. I've lived there for 3 years and never felt unsafe until, well, I'll get to that. It was a Tuesday in January, around 8 p.m. I was heading home from my late shift at the pharmacy, exhausted from counting pills and dealing with cranky customers all day. The snow was coming down hard, and I was focused on not sliding off the road when I heard it. Clear as day, a woman's voice from the passenger seat. "Don't go home." I nearly crashed into a snowbank. There was nobody in my car. Nobody. I pulled over, heart racing, and checked the back seat. Empty. My radio wasn't even on. "What the fuck?" I whispered, rubbing my eyes. Had I fallen asleep at the wheel? Was I that tired? I sat there for a minute, shivering despite the heater, then laughed it off as exhaustion and kept driving. But the voice stuck with me. "Don't go home." It had sounded urgent, almost pleading. By the time I turned onto my street, my hands were clammy on the steering wheel despite the cold. Everything looked normal. My porch light was on, just like I'd left it that morning. No strange cars, no footprints in the fresh snow leading to my door. "You're being ridiculous," I told myself as I parked in the driveway. But I didn't get out right away. I sat there staring at my house, this place I'd felt safe in for years, suddenly looking wrong somehow. I called my sister. "Hey, weird question," I said when she answered. "Do you ever get random feelings about stuff that turn out to be true?" She laughed. "Like premonitions?" "Not really." "Why? You having psychic moments?" "No, it's stupid. I just had this weird feeling, like I shouldn't go inside." Her tone changed. "Then don't. Come stay with me tonight." "It's probably nothing," I said, embarrassed now. "Julia, seriously, if something feels off, listen to it. Remember that podcast we were talking about? About intuition?" I did remember. Some expert talking about how intuition is your brain processing information your conscious mind hasn't caught up with yet. "Yeah, okay, I'll come over." "Good, I'll open some wine." I started the car again, but something made me look back at the house. That's when I noticed the curtain in my bedroom window, just a slight movement, like someone had been standing there and stepped back quickly. My stomach dropped. I'd closed those curtains this morning. I reversed out of the driveway so fast I nearly hit my neighbor's mailbox. My hands were shaking so badly I had to pull over a block away to call 911. "I think someone's in my house," I told the dispatcher, feeling ridiculous and terrified at the same time. The police took 15 minutes to arrive. I watched from down the street as they approached my house, flashlights sweeping across the yard. One officer went around back while the other knocked on the front door. After what felt like hours, an officer came to my car. "Ma'am, we found someone in your house. A man. He was hiding in your bedroom closet." My body went cold. "In my closet?" The officer nodded. "He had duct tape, zip ties, and a hunting knife." "Do you know a James Mercer?" I shook my head. "He lives 2 streets over. Says he's been watching you for months." They brought him out in handcuffs. Even from a distance, I recognized him. The quiet guy who was always at the coffee shop when I stopped for my morning latte. Who sometimes showed up at the grocery store when I was there. Who I'd noticed walking his dog past my house more times than seemed coincidental. I never went back to that house. I moved in with my sister until I found a new place in a different town. The police found a journal in James's apartment with detailed notes about my routine, my habits, even what bedroom I slept in. He'd been in my house at least 3 times before while I was at work. He had pictures of me sleeping. The psychiatrist who evaluated him said he'd been planning that night for weeks. The snow had given him the perfect opportunity. No footprints, neighbors staying indoors, the sound muffled by the storm. I still don't know whose voice I heard in my car that night. I've tried to convince myself it was just my subconscious picking up on small things that didn't add up. Maybe I'd noticed him watching me more than I realized, but part of me thinks it was something else, something I can't explain. All I know is that voice saved my life. Story 2. I never believed in anything supernatural until last year. I'm just a regular guy from Michigan who works as an electrician. Nothing special about me. And I've always been pretty grounded in reality. That's what made this whole thing so damn unsettling. It started with these dreams I kept having, not every night, but maybe once a week for about a month. I'd be wandering through some woods at night, completely lost. The dreams were always identical. Same trees, same feeling of being watched, same everything. The worst part was this voice that would call out to me from somewhere I couldn't see. "Hey, what are you doing out here?" It would shout, and I'd hear footsteps coming toward me, getting faster. I'd always wake up right before whoever it was caught up to me. After a few weeks of this, the dreams stopped. I figured it was just stress from work or something and forgot about it. Then in August, my buddy Jake suggested we go hiking at Pigeon Creek Park, about an hour from where I live. I'm not much of an outdoorsy guy, but the weather was nice and I needed to get out of the house. We got there around 3 p.m. The trail was pretty easy, just a basic loop through the woods. Jake was ahead of me, talking about some girl he'd met at a bar. About halfway through the hike, I needed to take a leak. I told Jake I'd catch up with him and stepped off the trail. I walked maybe 15 yards into the trees to find some privacy. The park wasn't crowded, but I didn't want to risk anyone seeing me. As I moved deeper into the woods, something felt familiar. The way the trees were arranged, how the light filtered through the leaves. It gave me this weird déjà vu feeling I couldn't shake. I spotted a small clearing ahead that would work and started heading toward it. That's when I heard the crackling sound of a fire. I froze, confused. Fires weren't allowed in this part of the park. I took a few more steps and spotted it. A small makeshift campsite tucked behind some fallen trees. There was a small tent, a few bags, and a freshly built campfire with flames just starting to grow. Sitting next to it was a man I couldn't quite make out. Something about the scene made my skin crawl. Before I could back away, the man's head snapped up. He must have heard me. For a second, neither of us moved. "Hey, what are you doing out here?" he called out. My blood turned to ice. It was the exact voice from my dreams. Same tone, same inflection, everything. I couldn't even respond. The man stood up and started walking toward me, moving between the trees. "I asked you a question," he said, getting closer. "What are you doing out here?" I finally found my voice. "Just hiking," I managed to say. "Sorry to bother you." He kept coming closer, and I could see him better now. He was tall, thin, wearing dirty clothes. His face looked normal enough, but there was something off about his eyes. They didn't seem to blink. "This isn't a hiking trail," he said, now only about 20 feet away. "You shouldn't be here." I started backing up. "I'm sorry, I just needed to use the bathroom. I'll head back to the trail." He smiled then, and it was the most unnerving thing I've ever seen. "No, I don't think you will," he said. That's when I noticed the knife in his hand. Not a camping knife or anything practical. This was a long, curved blade that looked like it had been sharpened recently. I turned and ran. I crashed through branches and jumped over logs, not caring about the noise I was making or the scratches I was getting. I could hear him behind me, moving fast. I didn't look back. I burst onto the trail, nearly colliding with an older couple walking their dog. They jumped back in surprise. "Are you okay?" the woman asked, looking concerned. I was gasping for breath, looking behind me. There was no one there. No sound of pursuit, nothing. "Did you see someone following me?" I asked them. They exchanged glances. "No, dear. You came running out of the woods alone." I thanked them and jogged down the trail to find Jake. We left immediately. I made up some excuse about feeling sick. For weeks afterward, I kept expecting to see that man again. I checked the local news for any reports of attacks or murders in the park. Nothing. What freaks me out the most isn't that I ran into some creep in the woods. It's that I dreamed about him, heard his exact words before I ever met him. Sometimes I wonder if I actually did meet him that day, or if it was something else entirely, something I'm not supposed to understand. I haven't been hiking since, and those woods I see in my dreams, I recognize them now. I won't be going back. Story 3. I never believed in premonitions until 3 years ago. I worked as a park ranger at a remote outpost in Wyoming. The nearest town was 40 minutes away, and my closest neighbor was 5 miles down an unmarked dirt road. The isolation never bothered me until that night in February. A blizzard had been forecasted, so my boyfriend Justin decided to stay the night instead of driving back to town. The wind was already howling by sunset, throwing snow against the windows like someone was tossing handfuls of sand. We lost power around 9 p.m., lit some candles, and eventually went to bed early. I woke up suddenly at 3:17 a.m. I remember checking my phone because the power had come back on. Justin was snoring softly beside me. I tried to fall back asleep but kept hearing this weird scratching sound that seemed to be coming from the roof. Probably just branches scraping in the wind, I told myself. When I finally drifted off, I had the most vivid dream. I was standing with Justin on this frozen lake. Everything was silent. No wind, no birds, nothing. The ice beneath us was so clear, you could see straight down into the dark water. Justin was staring at something in the distance, completely ignoring me. "Justin," I kept saying, but he wouldn't turn around. "Justin, please!" Finally, he spun around and grabbed my shoulders hard. His face was pale, eyes wide with terror. "Mel," he whispered urgently, "someone's in the cabin." I jolted awake, heart pounding. Justin was still asleep next to me. The digital clock on the nightstand read 4:03 a.m. Then I heard it, a soft thud from the kitchen. My first thought was that our cat Murphy had knocked something over, but then I remembered. Murphy was staying with my sister in town. Another thud, then the unmistakable sound of a cupboard door closing. I nudged Justin, my hand shaking. "Wake up," I whispered. "I think someone's in the house." He stirred groggily. "What? It's probably nothing." "No, listen." We both went silent. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps moving across our kitchen floor. Justin sat up, suddenly alert. "Stay here," he mouthed, reaching for the baseball bat we kept beside the bed. Before he could get up, we heard another sound, a low, guttural humming, not like someone casually humming a tune, but this eerie, monotonous drone that raised every hair on my body. Then the footsteps started coming toward our bedroom. Justin gripped the bat tighter. I was frozen, staring at our bedroom door, which we'd left cracked open. The footsteps stopped right outside. The humming grew louder. Through the crack in the door, I saw a shadow pass by the hallway light we always left on. Not the shadow of a person. It was too tall, too thin, the proportions all wrong. Then the doorknob started to turn. Justin lunged forward to slam the door shut, but before he could reach it, the power went out again. Complete darkness. The humming stopped. We sat there in the pitch black, not daring to move or even breathe. My phone was on the other side of the room, and I was too terrified to get up and grab it. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Justin whispered, "I'm going to check." "No," I pleaded, clutching his arm, but he was already sliding out of bed. I heard him fumbling for the bat in the darkness. Then my phone suddenly lit up with an incoming call. The screen illuminated the room enough for us to see that our bedroom door was now wide open. There was no one there. The caller ID showed it was my sister at 4:17 a.m. With shaking hands, I answered. "Mel?" My sister's voice was trembling. "Thank God you picked up. I had this horrible feeling something was wrong. Are you okay?" I couldn't speak. I just started crying. Justin searched the entire cabin with his flashlight. All the doors and windows were still locked from the inside. Nothing was disturbed in the kitchen. There was no sign anyone had been there, except for one thing. On the kitchen table was a puddle of water. Not from a leak. It was perfectly round, about the size of a dinner plate, and floating in it was a single black feather. We left as soon as the sun came up. I never spent another night in that cabin alone, and 2 months later, I transferred to a different park. Story 4. Most people who know me would call me the skeptical type. I'm a 34-year-old accountant from Rochester who spends weekends doing home renovations and watching baseball. Not exactly the profile of someone who jumps at shadows. My wife Sarah and I had just bought this 1920s colonial in a quiet neighborhood. The previous owners had lived there for 40 years before moving to Florida, and the house needed work, but the price was right. We were excited about the character. Crown molding, original hardwood floors, even a clawfoot tub upstairs. The basement, though, something about it always felt off. I'm just going to grab another beer, I told Sarah one Friday night as we were watching a movie. It was around 11 p.m., and we were both exhausted from a week of unpacking. Grab me one too, she called after me. I headed down the narrow wooden stairs to the unfinished basement. We'd stuffed our extra fridge down there when we moved in. The light was just a single bulb hanging from a chain, casting weird shadows across the concrete floor and stone foundation walls. As I opened the fridge, I heard something that made the hair on my arm stand up. Hello, it was a whisper, a woman's voice coming from the darkest corner of the basement behind the old workbench. I froze, the cold air from the fridge washing over me. Hello, I called back, my voice sounding strained even to my own ears. Silence, just the hum of the refrigerator. Is someone there? I tried again, peering into the darkness. Our basement had those small rectangular windows near the ceiling, and a faint glow from the streetlight outside cast just enough light that I could make out shapes, but not much else. I've been waiting for you. The whisper came again, clearer this time. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I slammed the fridge door shut and fumbled for my phone in my pocket, turning on the flashlight. This isn't funny, I said, trying to sound authoritative, but hearing the tremor in my voice. Who's there? I swept the beam across the basement. Nothing but boxes, our old couch we hadn't figured out what to do with yet, and the usual basement junk. Behind you. I spun around so fast I almost dropped my phone. Nothing there but the stairs. Sarah? I called upstairs. Are you messing with me? What? I heard her call back from upstairs, her voice muffled. Did you get lost down there? That's when it happened. As I stood there, flashlight trembling in my hand, I felt something cold brush against the back of my neck. Not like a breeze, like fingers. Cold, dry fingers trailing across my skin. You shouldn't have come here. The voice was right in my ear now. I could feel the breath, or whatever it was, cold against my skin. I don't remember dropping the beers or running up the stairs. I just remember slamming the basement door behind me and finding Sarah staring at me from the couch. Jesus, Mike, you look like you've seen a ghost, she said, laughing nervously. What happened? Did you come down to the basement at all? Maybe through the bulkhead door outside? I demanded, my hands shaking as I locked the basement door. Sarah's expression shifted from amusement to concern. No, I've been sitting here the whole time. What's going on? I told her what happened, feeling ridiculous with each word. But as I spoke, her face drained of color. The realtor mentioned something weird, she said slowly. Remember how she said the previous owner's daughter lived with them until she died? She was in her 60s and never married. Apparently, she spent most of her time in the basement. Had a whole little apartment set up down there. And you're just telling me this now? I asked, my voice rising. I didn't think it mattered. People die in houses all the time, especially old ones. We sat up half the night debating whether I'd imagined it or not. By morning, in the bright sunshine streaming through our kitchen windows, it seemed silly. I convinced myself it was just the stress of moving, maybe a neighbor kid playing a prank. The explanation didn't really matter as long as it wasn't what it felt like. 2 days later, I had to go back down for tools. I made Sarah come with me. Nothing happened. Same the next time, and the next. Eventually, I stopped thinking about it. Story 5. I live in rural Montana, where the winters are brutal and cell service is spotty at best. My nearest neighbor is 2 miles away, which is exactly how I like it. That January was particularly harsh, temperatures dropping to minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit, with blizzards that would appear out of nowhere. I worked at the local veterinary clinic about 30 minutes from my cabin, and one night I got caught working late with a sick horse. It was around 10 p.m. when I finally headed home. The snow was coming down in sheets, visibility maybe 15 feet ahead of my headlights. The radio kept cutting in and out, mostly static, punctuated by brief snippets of late-night talk shows. About halfway home, my truck started making this weird clicking sound. Then the dashboard lights flickered and everything just died. Engine, lights, heat, everything gone in an instant. Shit, I muttered, pulling over as best I could. Not tonight. I tried the ignition several times, but nothing. Dead battery most likely, or maybe the alternator. Either way, I was screwed. No cell service, no houses nearby, just endless forest and snow. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove compartment and put on my heavy winter gear. The temperature gauge in my truck had read minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit before it died. I knew I couldn't stay put. I'd freeze to death by morning. I figured I had two options: walk back toward town or press forward toward home. Home was closer by about 3 miles, so I decided to hoof it. The silence was absolute once I stepped out of the truck. The kind of silence that feels like pressure against your eardrums. My boots crunched through the fresh snow as I started walking. Flashlight beam cutting through the darkness and swirling snow. After about 20 minutes of walking, I started to feel like something was off. The woods seemed different. I'd driven this road hundreds of times, but nothing looked familiar in the heavy snowfall. Still, I kept the road beneath my feet and pressed on. That's when I heard it, a child's laughter, clear as day, somewhere in the woods to my right. I stopped dead in my tracks, heart suddenly pounding. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding unnaturally loud. Nothing, just howling wind and snow. I must have imagined it, I thought, stress and cold playing tricks on my mind. I kept walking, picking up my pace. 10 minutes later, I heard it again, closer this time. A child's giggle, followed by what sounded like someone shushing them. "Is someone out there?" I yelled, panic rising in my throat. "There are no houses out here. No children should be in these woods at night during a blizzard." I swung my flashlight wildly toward the trees, the beam catching nothing but swirling snow and dark pines. Then I saw it, just for a second, what looked like a small figure darting between trees about 50 feet into the forest. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice cracking. "Are you lost? Do you need help?" Silence again, then a whisper that seemed to come from right behind me. "You're the one who's lost." I whipped around, nearly falling. Nothing there. Nothing but snow and darkness. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the flashlight. This was insane. I was hallucinating. Had to be. I turned back toward the road and froze. Standing in the middle of the road, maybe 30 feet ahead, was a small child. A little girl in what looked like a nightgown. In this weather. No coat, no boots, just standing there. "Oh my God," I gasped. "Are you okay? Where did you come from?" She didn't answer, just stood there, her face obscured by long dark hair. I approached slowly. "Hey, sweetheart, it's dangerous out here. Let me help you." When I got within 10 feet, she finally looked up at me. Her face was blue. Not from cold, actually blue. And her eyes, Christ, her eyes were completely black. No whites, no iris, just empty black pools. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice somehow both childlike and ancient at the same time. "This is where I died." I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet and landing hard on my ass in the snow. The flashlight flew from my hand, spinning across the icy road. When I looked back up, she was gone. I scrambled for the flashlight, hands numb with cold and terror. When I finally grabbed it and pointed it back to where she'd been standing, there was nothing. No footprints in the fresh snow. No sign anyone had been there at all. But there was something. Something I hadn't noticed before. A small wooden cross planted at the roadside, nearly buried in snow. I brushed it off with trembling hands. The crude carving read, "Emily Wilson, age 8, 1978. I ran. I don't remember much of the next hour except running until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. Somehow, I made it home. The next day, after the storm cleared, I went to the local library and looked through old newspapers. In January 1978, an 8-year-old girl named Emily Wilson had wandered away from her home during a blizzard. They found her body 3 days later, frozen to death almost exactly where my truck had broken down. I don't drive that road at night anymore. Story 6, I never thought I'd be sharing this, but it's kept me up for years. Maybe someone here has experienced something similar. I was 13 when it happened. Summer of '97 in a small town outside Pittsburgh. Back then, I was a skinny, awkward kid with glasses too big for my face. Always with my best friend Tommy. That day started like any other. Tommy and I were riding our bikes home from the community pool, taking the shortcut through Highland Avenue, where they were tearing down the old mason factory. "Hey, look at those losers!" a voice shouted from the demolition site. 3 high school guys were hanging out by the fence smoking. I recognized the tallest one as Derek Phillips, a notorious asshole from my neighborhood. "Just keep riding," I muttered to Tommy. "What's your hurry, faggots?" Derek called out. Then I heard the first rock hit the pavement behind us. Tommy pedaled faster, but I hesitated looking back. Big mistake. The second rock caught me square in the forehead with a sickening crack. I remember the strange weightlessness as I fell, then the hot, wet feeling spreading across my face. "Holy shit, Alex! Alex!" Tommy's voice sounded distant as I lay on the sidewalk. "You're bleeding everywhere." I touched my forehead and my fingers came away red. The pain hit a moment later, sharp and throbbing. Through blurry vision, I saw the older boys running away laughing. "We need to get help," Tommy said, voice shaking. "Can you walk?" I tried getting up but immediately felt dizzy. Blood was pooling beneath me on the concrete. This was before cell phones were common, at least for kids like us. The nearest payphone was at the 7-Eleven a mile away. "I'll go get help," Tommy said, clearly panicking. That's when I heard the truck slowing down beside us. A blue Ford pickup, rusty around the wheel wells. The driver's side window rolled down, revealing an older man with weathered skin and a gray mustache. Maybe late 50s, wearing a plaid shirt and a baseball cap that said "Veteran" across the front. "You boys all right?" he asked, though the answer was obviously no. His eyes widened when he saw the blood. "Get in. I'll take you to the hospital." That's when Tommy grabbed my arm. "Alex, no way," he whispered. "We don't know him," but something about the man felt safe. I can't explain it. Through the fog of pain and fear, I felt certain we could trust him. "It's okay," I told Tommy. "Let's go." The man hopped out and helped me into the truck. Tommy reluctantly climbed in after me, watching the stranger with suspicious eyes. "Name's Gerald," the man said as he pulled away from the curb. "That's a nasty cut. Head wounds bleed like crazy, but try not to worry." He drove calmly but quickly, taking the exact route to Mercy Hospital that my mom would have taken. No wrong turns, no hesitation. "You from around here?" Tommy asked, still wary. Gerald nodded. "All my life. Used to work at the steel mill before they closed it." His voice was gentle, with a slight rasp. "What happened to you boys?" "Some jerks were throwing rocks," I said, pressing a wadded-up t-shirt against my head. Gerald frowned. "Kids can be cruel. You'll be all right though, son." When we arrived at the ER, Gerald helped me inside while Tommy explained what happened to the receptionist. They took all our information, mine, Tommy's, and Gerald's. I remember Gerald writing his full name on the form, Gerald William Hoffman. The nurse took me back immediately, and when I looked around for Gerald, he was already gone. Just disappeared without a word. 6 stitches, a mild concussion, and a small fracture. The doctors said I was lucky it wasn't worse. My parents arrived later, frantic and angry about the boys who'd hurt me. A week passed before my mom suggested what had been on my mind. "You should thank that man who helped you. That was a kind thing he did." The next day I looked up Hoffman Gerald in the phone book. Only one listing matched. I called the number, rehearsing my thank you speech. A woman answered. "Hello? Hi, is Gerald there?" "Gerald Hoffman?" I asked. There was a pause. "Who's calling?" Her voice sounded strained. I explained who I was and why I was calling. That's when she started crying. "I'm sorry," she said. "Gerald was my husband. He passed away 6 months ago. Heart attack while fishing at Blackwater Creek." My blood ran cold. "But that's impossible. He drove us to the hospital last week." "I'm sorry, young man, but you must be confused. Gerald's been gone since January." I described him, the plaid shirt, the baseball cap, the mustache, the blue pickup. She confirmed every detail, even mentioning he always wore that veteran cap his son had given him. Later that week, my mom helped me find his obituary in the library's newspaper archives. There he was, the same man who'd driven us to the hospital, smiling in a photo. Gerald William Hoffman, 58, former steel worker, Vietnam veteran, dead 6 months before he saved us. I've never told many people this story. Tommy and I don't talk about it much, though we both know what we saw. The hospital records confirmed his name, and his widow confirmed his death. Whoever, or whatever, picked us up that day, I'm grateful. But 15 years later, I still get chills thinking about those kind eyes and that gentle voice belonging to someone who, by all accounts, couldn't possibly have been there. Story 7. Living alone in rural Vermont has its challenges, especially during the harsh months when the snow piles up and darkness falls by 4 p.m. My nearest neighbor is about a mile down the road, which usually gives me the peace I crave as a writer. But that night in January, I would have given anything for someone else to be there. It started with the storm. The forecast had warned of heavy snow, but they hadn't mentioned the winds that came with it, howling like something wounded and angry. I'd stocked up on supplies earlier that day, knowing I might be stuck at home for a while. By nightfall, the power went out. No big deal. I had my wood stove, candles, and was settled in with a book by flashlight. My dog Max, a German Shepherd mix I'd rescued 2 years back, lay at my feet near the stove's warmth. Everything was fine until around 10 p.m. when Max suddenly stood up. His ears perked forward, and he stared at the hallway leading to my bedroom. I heard nothing except the wind outside. "What is it, boy?" I asked, but he just kept staring. Then he growled. In 2 years, I'd never heard Max growl like that, deep and threatening. The hair along his spine stood up. "Max?" I reached for his collar, but he moved away from me, still facing the dark hallway. That's when I heard it, a soft click from down the hall, the kind of sound a door latch makes when it's being carefully opened. "Hello," I called out, immediately feeling stupid. I lived alone. There shouldn't be anyone to answer, but someone, or something, did. It wasn't words exactly, more like a sigh, but deliberate enough that it couldn't have been the wind or house settling. Max barked once, sharply, then went silent again, still fixated on the hallway. I grabbed my phone to use as a flashlight and slowly stood up. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. "If someone's there, I've called the police," I lied, knowing full well I had no cell service during storms like this. I took one step toward the hallway, and my bedroom door, which had been partially open, slammed shut with such force that the walls seemed to shake. Max went crazy, barking and lunging toward the hallway, but I held him back. "Stay!" I commanded, my voice cracking. Then came the footsteps, slow, deliberate steps across my bedroom floor. The floorboards in that room always creaked. I knew exactly what those footsteps sounded like. But my bedroom is small, maybe 12 feet across. The footsteps continued for much longer than it would take to cross the room. Back and forth, back and forth. "Who's there?" I shouted, clutching Max's collar so hard my knuckles hurt. The footsteps stopped immediately. Silence stretched for what felt like minutes, broken only by Max's low growl and my own ragged breathing. Then the doorknob to my bedroom began to turn. Slowly, deliberately. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Max had gone completely silent beside me, trembling against my leg. The door opened just an inch, then stopped. From within my bedroom, my empty bedroom, came a woman's voice so quiet I almost missed it. "Help me!" The door slammed shut again. Max broke free from my grip and ran to the front door, scratching desperately to get out. I didn't blame him. I wanted to run too, but something kept me frozen in place, staring at my bedroom door. "Who are you?" I managed to whisper. No answer came, just silence. Then the temperature dropped dramatically. I could see my breath clouding in front of me, despite the wood stove still burning brightly. The cold air seemed to concentrate in the hallway, forming what looked like a faint mist. Within that mist, I swear I could make out the vague outline of a person, not solid enough to see features, just a human-shaped disturbance in the air. The figure moved toward me, the temperature dropping further with each apparent step. My phone died suddenly. The flashlight blinked out, leaving only the orange glow from the wood stove illuminating the room. In that dim light, I saw the misty figure stop at the edge of the hallway. Max went silent, cowering behind me now. The figure seemed to raise what might have been an arm pointing at me, or perhaps past me, to the wall behind where I stood. Without thinking, I turned to look. There was nothing there but my bookshelf. When I looked back toward the hallway, the mist was gone. The temperature began to rise almost immediately. Max stopped trembling. I spent the rest of the night huddled with Max by the wood stove, jumping at every creak and groan of the house. When morning finally came, I searched the entire house. Nothing was disturbed in my bedroom. No footprints in the snow outside my windows. No explanation. I later learned from town records that a woman had died in this house in the 1970s. She had been found clutching a note that was never made public. The previous owners never mentioned this when I bought the place 2 years ago. I've tried to convince myself it was all just stress and an overactive imagination during a power outage. But Max still won't go down that hallway at night. Story 8. I'm Jake, 32, living in rural Michigan in my grandparents' old farmhouse. They passed away 5 years ago, and I moved in after my divorce. The house is over a century old with all the creaks and quirks you'd expect, but I'd never felt uncomfortable there until that night. It was mid-January, temperature well below freezing. A blizzard had knocked out power across the county. I was huddled by the fireplace with my dog Cooper, a German Shepherd mix who normally doesn't get spooked by anything. Around 2 a.m., Cooper suddenly sat up, ears perked, staring at the basement door across the living room. At first, I ignored it. "Cooper, chill. Probably just mice," I muttered, throwing another log on the fire. But he wouldn't settle down. He got up, hair raised along his spine, and gave a low growl I'd never heard from him before. That's when I noticed how unnaturally cold it had gotten near the basement door. The fire was roaring just 15 feet away, but I could see my breath in that corner of the room. "What the hell?" I whispered, grabbing my flashlight. Cooper whined and backed away when I approached the door. That should have been my first warning. This dog who chased bears off our property was terrified of something. The basement door has always been a bit warped. Doesn't close properly unless you really pull it. But now it was completely shut, tight, like someone had sealed it from the other side. As I reached for the handle, I heard something that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. A rhythmic scratching sound coming from the other side. Not like an animal, more deliberate, like fingernails dragging slowly across the wood. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Then a whisper so faint I almost missed it. "Let me out." I jumped back, dropping the flashlight. It rolled, beam pointing at the bottom of the door, where a dark liquid was seeping through. Not water. Too thick. Too dark. "Who's there?" I demanded, voice shaking. "This isn't funny." The scratching stopped. Complete silence. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. Then the door handle began to turn, slowly, by itself. Cooper lost it, barking frantically and pulling at my sleeve, trying to drag me away. I'm not ashamed to admit I froze. Couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Just watched as that brass handle rotated inch by inch. The door opened a crack, just enough to see there was no light in the basement, just pitch blackness, and something moving in that darkness. I caught a glimpse of pale, almost translucent fingers wrapping around the edge of the door, long with too many joints. Not human. That's when Cooper lunged forward, snapping and snarling at whatever was coming through. And I swear to God, something hissed back at him. Not an animal hiss. Something that sounded like static and whispers combined. I finally snapped out of it, grabbed Cooper's collar, and ran for the front door. We spent the night in my truck with the engine running and lights on. I kept looking back at the house, half expecting to see something watching from the windows. When morning came and power returned, I checked the basement with my neighbor. Nothing unusual. No liquid under the door. No signs of any intruder. The door opened normally, a bit sticky from humidity as always. I've replaced the basement door with a steel one, added 3 deadbolts. Cooper still won't go near it, and neither will I after dark. Story 9. We moved into that house in Traverse City about 3 years ago. It wasn't anything special, just a basic 3-bedroom with peeling paint and carpet that should have been replaced in the 90s. But the rent was cheap, and after my divorce, cheap was exactly what I needed. I work nights at the hospital, ER nurse, so my sleep schedule's always been messed up. But what happened that day wasn't about being tired or seeing things. The house next door had been vacant for months. Big Victorian thing, with a wraparound porch that was probably gorgeous back in the day. Now it just looked sad. Paint flaking off, shutters hanging crooked, yard overgrown. The kind of place kids would dare each other to touch on Halloween. That morning after my shift, around 6 a.m., I was making coffee when I noticed movement over there. Just a quick flash in an upstairs window. Probably squirrels or birds that had found their way in, I figured. I crashed for a few hours, woke up around 2 p.m., and was sitting on my back deck trying to fully wake up when I heard piano music. Not from someone's radio or anything, actual piano playing, the kind where you can almost feel the vibration of the strings. It was coming from next door. Guess someone's finally moved in, I said to myself, though I hadn't seen any moving trucks or anything. The music was weird. Not bad exactly, just off, like someone who almost knew how to play, but kept hitting wrong notes. It would sound beautiful for a few measures, then hit these discordant chords that made my skin crawl. I finished my coffee and headed inside to shower. When I came back out to grab a sandwich before my shift, the music had stopped. I noticed the curtains in that upstairs window were drawn now. Heavy, dark fabric that looked too nice for an abandoned house. "Hey!" I called out to my neighbor Dan, who was mowing his lawn. "Someone move in next door?" He killed the mower engine. "What? No way. That place has been empty since old Mrs. Kellerman died. Owner's some investment company in Chicago trying to flip it, but they can't find buyers. Place has too many issues." Weird. Could have sworn I heard piano music coming from there earlier. Dan shrugged. Probably just someone's car stereo. Sound carries weird on this street. I nodded, but I knew what I'd heard. That night at work was brutal. 3 car accidents and a drug overdose before midnight. By the time I got home at 6:30 a.m., I was dead on my feet. I just wanted to faceplant into bed. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a light on in the neighbor's house. Second floor, corner room, just a soft yellow glow. I sat there for a minute, engine idling, debating whether to call the cops about trespassers. But honestly, I was too damn tired to care. Probably just kids breaking in to smoke or make out. I dragged myself inside, kicked off my shoes, and was about to head upstairs when I heard it again. The piano. Clearer now, like whoever was playing had been practicing. It was a melody I almost recognized. Something classical that I couldn't quite place. Haunting. Beautiful. Then it hit a sour note that made me physically wince. Then another, and another. Until it wasn't music anymore, but just random, angry pounding. Then silence. I stood frozen in my entryway, keys still in hand. That silence felt heavier than the noise had been. "Screw this," I muttered, grabbing my phone to call the non-emergency police line. As I was dialing, I looked out my side window toward the old house. There was a woman standing at the second floor window, just staring at me. Even from this distance, I could make out her face clearly. Long, dark hair, pale skin, features that seemed too sharp, too angular. She wore something high-necked and old-fashioned. I raised my hand automatically in an awkward half-wave. She didn't move, just kept staring. Then she smiled. It wasn't right. Her mouth stretched too wide, the corners pulling back impossibly far. No human face could make that expression. My phone slipped from my hand, clattering on the hardwood. I blinked, and she was gone. The light was out, the window empty. I scrambled to pick up my phone, hands shaking so badly I could barely dial 911. 911? What's your emergency? There's someone in the abandoned house next door to me, I managed to say, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. I don't know what I think. They sent an officer over within 15 minutes. Young guy, probably not long out of academy. He walked around the property with his flashlight, checked all the doors and windows. All secure, he reported when he came back to my porch. No signs of entry. Place is locked up tight. You sure about what you saw? I nodded, feeling stupid. There was a light, and I heard piano music. He looked at me kindly. Been working nights long? Yeah, I admitted. Happens to the best of us. Mind plays tricks when you mess with your sleep schedule. I thanked him, apologized for wasting his time, and went inside. But I didn't sleep that day. Couldn't. I sat in my living room with all the lights on, staring at that house until the sun was high in the sky. I put in for a transfer to day shift the next week, and I started looking for a new place to live. Story 10. I've never been the type to believe in ghosts or anything supernatural. I'm 32, work in IT, and consider myself pretty rational. But something happened last winter that I still can't explain, and it honestly keeps me up some nights. My parents live about 30 minutes outside of Pittsburgh in this quiet suburb. Nothing ever happens there. They went on a cruise to celebrate their anniversary, and I volunteered to check on their place every few days. Water the plants, bring in mail, that sort of thing. It was around 8 p.m. on a Tuesday in January. The temperature had dropped to maybe 15 degrees, and there was about 6 inches of snow on the ground. Nobody should have been out walking in that weather. I had just finished up inside, set their alarm, and was heading to my car. The neighborhood was dead quiet, that special kind of winter quiet where sound gets absorbed by the snow. The streetlights created these perfect little pools of yellow light every 50 feet or so along the sidewalk. That's when I noticed him. There was this old man walking backwards down the sidewalk about half a block away. Not just backing up, but full on walking in reverse like someone had hit rewind on a VHS tape. He moved smoothly, too smoothly for someone his age, especially on snow-covered concrete. I unlocked my car door but couldn't stop watching him. He was wearing this dark brown overcoat that looked decades old and a hat pulled down low, but I could see his face clearly under the streetlight. The moment I noticed him, he stopped, just froze mid-step. And then he turned his head, only his head, toward me. Our eyes met, and he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It wasn't threatening either. It was knowing, like he'd been waiting for me to notice him. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet. He didn't respond, just kept that same smile fixed on his face. Feeling suddenly uneasy, I got into my car and started the engine. The heat came on full blast because I'd left it that way on the drive over. I adjusted the vents, put the car in drive, and looked back to the sidewalk. He was still there, still smiling, still looking directly at me. I pulled away from the curb, checking my rearview mirror to keep an eye on him, and then he was just gone. I slammed on the brakes, nearly skidding on the icy street. I whipped my head around, checking every mirror, even opening my door to look back. Nothing. No footprints leading away. No evidence anyone had been standing there at all. The street was completely empty. I sat there for maybe a full minute, engine running, trying to process what just happened. There was nowhere he could have gone. No side yards to duck into, no cars that had driven by. The houses on that street are set back from the sidewalk with open front lawns. He would have had to sprint across 30 feet of untouched snow to reach any doorway. But the snow was pristine, untouched. I checked again, more carefully this time. No footprints where he had been walking, not even where I had clearly seen him standing seconds earlier. It was as if he had never been there at all. I finally drove home, my hands shaking on the wheel the whole way. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that there must be a logical explanation. Maybe he ducked behind a parked car I hadn't noticed. Maybe the weird lighting played tricks on my eyes. But I know what I saw. I never told my parents about it. What would I even say? "Hey, I think I saw a ghost outside your house?" They'd think I was losing it. I did go back 2 days later to water the plants again. I parked in the exact same spot, and before I went inside, I walked down to where I'd seen him. I stood there for a while looking around, feeling stupid. That's when I noticed something on the ground, partially covered by snow. I bent down and picked it up. It was an old, worn button, brown, made of some kind of bakelite material that they don't use anymore. Exactly like the buttons I'd seen on that old overcoat. I dropped it like it had burned me. I'm not ashamed to say I practically ran back to my parents' house, did what I needed to do as quickly as possible, and got the hell out of there. I still have no explanation for what happened that night. Sometimes I try to convince myself it was just some strange old man who happened to move very quickly and quietly. But deep down, I know there's no logical explanation for what I saw, and I still won't visit my parents' house after dark. Thanks for watching. Don't leave before leaving a like to this video. Also hit the subscribe button to support my work. And as always, have a horrific nightmare, my dear.